And good morning, all, and beautiful Saturday, or it will be later when the clouds go off. But just looking at all the beautiful pictures behind people, of course, it's all virtual, but it looks nice. Before I forget, Beth, I was thinking of you this morning as I read it's the anniversary of the release of The Great Locomotive Chase. So, one of our favorite films, and Beth took us to see the General, the star of that. Number of weeks or months ago. So today we're going to look at something different. It's World War II newsreels. Oh, by the way, I want to think about last week's show. After the show, Carol told me she thought she was going to be seeing the title, of course, was Walt Disney's Home Movies. She thought she was going to be looking at home movies taken by Walt Disney, as opposed to it was the Walt Disney Home Movies commercial releases. So I've already given her a full refund. If anybody else didn't like this, so just bring your tickets to the box office, and we'll take care of it. So this week's a little bit more self-explanatory. It's World War II newsreels. Just real quick, it's not something I generally collect, but I think I mentioned last week. Belong to a group on Facebook of 8mm film collectors and enthusiasts. And this woman was getting rid of some of her dad's possessions, and then she had these two very rusty boxes of film and didn't want them. Did anybody want them for the price of the postage? And the first box, one box was locked. She couldn't get it open. The other box, she had some pictures, and it looked like, titles of World War II things that I knew. Tarawa, Truck Lagoon, things like that. So I got them. And then, of course, that takes it down another rabbit hole. Matter of fact, let me open up to get ready to share on the screen here. 1 second. Do I have the first picture ready? Yeah, let me get this here. So let me share the screen. There was a fellow named Eugene Castle, and Eugene had been real big into doing newsreels. Back in the 1920s, he was assembling all these newsreels to show in theaters, and he decided to do this on his own. Matter of fact, about newsreels, we go to a movie today, they obviously don't show short subjects on a general rule. They don't show newsreels. But in the 30s, 40s, newsreels were an amazing thing because there was no television. And if there was anything, you couldn't see something shot on the other side of the country. It wasn't on your station. Brent Warner, who's usually on these talks, couldn't make it this Saturday, but he sent me an interesting anecdote this morning about Pearl Harbor. His wife's uncle was stationed at Pearl Harbor, and everybody, of course, hears on the radio Pearl Harbor has been attacked, and they have no idea if Uncle Dominic is still alive or not. There was no way to get a phone call through. Obviously, no telegrams. It was taken forever for letters. Well, neighbors down the street went to the movies to see whatever the feature was, and the newsreel had footage of Pearl Harbor. They ran back to the family and said, "We just saw Dominic carrying a stretcher on a newsreel at Pearl Harbor. He's alive." And that's how the family then got up and they ran to the theater because they wanted to see their son, live on the thing. But that's how immediate a lot of these newsreels were done. They were shot and then they'd be in the theater the next week. So this guy Eugene Castle comes by and he's making all these newsreels for other people, and he decides, why don't I do these newsreels for myself? I can make money on it. So he forms a company called Castle Films. And I hadn't realized Castle Films, matter of fact, let me just start with their logo here. So share screen. Oh, hang on, I just closed it by mistake. 1 second. So share screen. Where are we? Here we go. And we are going to look at, okay. Here we go. So there's their logo, Castle Films. And for years and years, I had, never realized that Castle Films was named after a person, but that was his name, Eugene Castle. And he started doing his own newsreels. And he realized this was a very profitable business because a lot of the footage was done by other people. He could assemble it, put it out there, and sell it. So not only did he sell to theaters, but he started doing the home movie market. So let me, come on, mouse, here you are. So he started putting out these releases both on 8mm and 16mm. news parade, and he would sell them out there. As a matter of fact, the ads come up and list some of what he had. His catalog in later years, he went off and expanded the cartoons, comedy cartoons. He did a whole bunch of things where he would go to an old Western star like Hopalong Cassidy and say, "Let me take your movie here, and I'll put it out in maybe 8 different short subjects, cutting it out for each car, chase, horse chase, gun battle, whatever." He would go to a bunch of the old cartoon studios that had things like Farmer Alfalfa and other titles that had not been in the theaters in years. And he said, "You're not making any money on it. Let me have it and I'll split it with you." So he started putting this stuff out and he started doing really well. Matter of fact, over the years, it became one of the largest 8 millimeter distributors in the country. And this is the page from one of his catalogs. World War II comes by, and all of a sudden, the tremendous interest in what's going on overseas. Again, no television, people could get their news from the radio, but being able to see these victories, and you can imagine most of their stuff concentrated on our victories. They did do a one on Pearl Harbor and the disaster there, but for the most part, it was about how we were, beating the Germans, the Italians, the Japanese overseas. And this was really interesting to me that, as his ad says, you could, own these movies of Yank victories. And if we zoom in on it here a bit, whoops, zoom in. You can see the smashing finale of the Axis in Africa. You see the once proud Africa Corps cracking before Allied fury. What was really great for Eugene Castle was this film footage was available to him basically for free because the government wanted to get these stories out. So all these government photographers shooting the film, he came back and was able to put it out. If we continue to go down here through it, you can see that you could order these things, a 50-foot version for only $1.75. The 180 feet to 200-foot version, they varied a bit, was $5.50. And then for 16 millimeter, he had both a short version, a long version, and a sound version. These films we're going to see today are not particularly rare. Matter of fact, a number of them are on YouTube and other archives with the sound versions. But I found it interesting to think how many people were going off and buying. And $5.50 was not an insurmountable amount of money, in this point in time. I mean, again, adjusted for inflation, it seems silly, but it was a good amount of money for people to go. And I'd have to say, how often would you watch over and over in the glory of your own living room the Axis smashed in Africa? But they sold, and they sold very well. They ended up making, I think, it was 38 different reels of these things. And I ended up with the stuff I got from this woman. Hang on, I'm just going to print out something here real quick. I ended up, I think, getting 17 of the reels that she had. So okay, let me drop this down. So again, put out different ads. This particular week, we're fighting for Egypt, the tank battles, airplane battles, all sorts of odds and ends. These things sold very, very well. I got a big kick out of here. I don't know how he did it, but he was saying that these cost less than unexposed film. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, because I don't really know the price of film back then. But at one point, he made the claim in an interview that he was putting out, I think he said 20 movies a week. And he was pretty much a one-man band. He was doing his own editing and that sort of stuff. And he had a sales force, but to do to do that number of films in a period of time would be a real issue. Then somebody said, well, if you count the 8 millimeter version as one version, the 16 millimeter, the sound one, so who knows how many he put out, but he put out enough that somebody wrote an entire book on Castle films. And this is part of his catalog that he put out. So you would get the newsreels, and that's what he was doing basically, was putting out a newsreel every year, released in December. 1941, we're going to see his newsreel for that. He just missed Pearl Harbor. He had just gotten it out, so he actually lucked out in a way, because now he did the newsreel of 1941, but he also did the special edition for the Pearl Harbor attack. But these are some of the different things you could buy from him. Again, more stuff about World War II. I have a number of these here. But then he also went into things that he had for other odds and ends. And I don't have some of them, but This one sounds like it'd be fun to find the Coney Island one. I believe I do have the San Francisco World's Fair one. But then in later years, he started doing other movies on other subjects, famous celebrities, and then he went into cartoons. So as mentioned here, uh, ones that had not been shown for years and years and years, and take them out of the vault and put them back out here. So he had, his version of things like Snow White and that sort of stuff. Laugh Galore, A Boy Meets a Dog. One of the things he did every year was he put out a Christmas release, and you could get a different story of Santa Claus each year. And one of these ones was so popular, and I think they said it sold for 46 years in a row, that you could buy this one film. So World War II ends, no more of these newsreels anymore, but he got into releasing films from Universal Studios. Again, different prices and ads and that. But he gets into releasing films for Universal, and he now gets access to the Woody Woodpecker cartoons, a whole bunch of movies, because at that point, Universal owned a lot of films that they had gotten through Paramount. Um, it became a really big thing, and Universal ended up saying, okay, well, let you release our stuff, but we'd like also to buy a chunk of your company. And he was happy because he got a good chunk of money. Well, over the years, Universal saw more and more profitability in this line of business. They ended up buying out Eugene Castle, and Castle Films was owned for quite a few years by Universal Studios, and they released all sorts of Abbott and Costello movies and that. They later rebranded it as Universal 8, and it was going great until home video came along and it imploded. But what was interesting is if you look at this reel here, it's News Parade of the Year, and you can see they just rubber stamped in the year there. But they would produce for the silent version a script here that you could read along with the film. But what's really interesting is here's more of the script. If you look at the box here, this is in Super 8. So all these World War II films that had been shot and released and everything, there was still a market for this stuff during the Super 8 days, and people would go and buy it. That was a real interesting thing for me, because I ended up with a reel of film from the 1939 World's Fair, and I put it on my scanner, and I said, wait a second, this is a Super 8 film. And yeah, that's what it was. It was a re-release of a film from the 1939 New York World's Fair by Castle Films that Universal later put out on Super 8. So he did real well, sold off the business, and like I said, it went real well until about 1984 or so, when all of a sudden home video came out, and then there was no more market for the 8mm. So let me get the film here ready that I had, and we are going to share screen. Let me get the first one of these. So we're going to start with the News Parade of 1941. And let me just move this. What I've done here, by the way, is these are the raw scans of it that I've not done any cleanup or any basic work on it. But let me go and share screen here. Okay, there you go. So again, News Parade of the year 1941, edited by Eugene W. Castle. And this one starts off, the war had been going on overseas for quite a while in Japan and China have been fighting for years now, 5 years going on. This was the day when the U.S. wasn't directly involved in the war, but they formed the group, the Flying Tigers, and sent them over to deal with it. So again, he got all this footage for free. I thought this was an interesting topic to do in conjunction with the 80th anniversary of D-Day just 2 days ago, which in retrospect, I was also thinking I had been at the 40th anniversary. I could have shown pictures of that. Tobruk, if you don't know, it's on the northern shore of Africa, and the Allies had seized control of North Africa from the Italians. Basically, we weren't in the war at this point in time. It was the Commonwealth, British Commonwealth. So they seized all sorts of the land up there, and the Germans came back full force. They sent in Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. They captured almost all of the territory back. Let me just stop that here 1 second. Other than Tobruk, Tobruk was a small port on the northern shore, and they held on to it. And the Nazis tried everything they could to get them out. They did a siege there. They basically, the British got the land in from they captured it on January 10th, 1941. And on April 10th, the Nazis cut them off from land. They seized everything around there, and they tried to starve them out, try to bomb them out, try to do everything they could to get them out. You can imagine you're in this small town where you're ringed on 3 sides by German guns that are just shooting at you hour after hour, day after day, week after week. Well, they ended up breaking the siege. The Royal Navy was able to supply Tobruk. There's actually about 5 different movies made about it. But it was not an inconsequential issue. They had 3,836 defenders that were either killed, injured, or lost. Most of them are Australians. They became known as the Rats of Tobruk, which, if you ever remember the World War II TV series, The Rat Patrol, about the Americans racing around in their Jeeps in the desert, they kind of took the name from the Tobruk Rats. But it was a really a very important battle. We go into the next one, the Nazis. The Nazis had decided that Greece must fall because they needed to protect the oil fields of Romania, places like that. So they went off, and the Italians tried attacking Greece and were getting repelled. So the Germans came in full force and overthrew the government and took control there. So Athens fell on April 27th, 1941, and the Germans kept going to try to get it there. Now, in this particular one, the capture of Iraq was interesting. The Germans had taken a puppet government that they helped do a coup to take over the government of Iran, because they figured if they had Iran, they could go off and grab a very important asset nearby the Suez Canal and that. So the British said, no, obviously we don't want them here. So we're going to go off and we're going to help free Iran, and we're also going to free Syria. The Vichy forces were the French government that was formed after the Germans took over France. There was a bunch of collaborators that said, we'll run France for you, Germany. And this became a huge battle in here where they decided that they had to get these guys out of these 2 particular areas. So here you can see the Vichy French surrendering, and the French general, they're being taken into prisoners. This was a huge battle at the point in time, which now is not really particularly well known. We hop up to France, and obviously they're occupied by Germany now. Again, great propaganda. America's not in the war. Oh, one thing people may not realize, Hitler had a real sense of irony, I guess you could say, or sticking it to people. When the Germans surrendered in World War I, they did this documents in a rail car. When the France was surrendering to the Germans, he found that same rail car, brought it in, and made the French go and sign their surrender documents in the same rail car that they had the Germans had previously surrendered in. So these wars, obviously terrible things. It's all the pictures of the soldiers marching and everything. But as in some of these newsreels, they mention the horrible price to the civilians, particularly the innocents, the families, the children, sort of thing. So at this point, it's early December 1941. The U.S. is not in the war, but we are helping an awful lot. We are sending lots of convoys of material to Europe. We're lending them World War II destroyers. The old 4-stacker destroyers being sent over to England under Lend-Lease. But the U.S. is now getting ready. The Hood was, the people that aren't familiar with it, the Hood was England's newest, biggest, proudest battleship. It was about 2 months old, and it went off to fight with the Brit against the Germans in a battle. And much to Britain's absolute horror, the Bismarck was sunk in less than 10 minutes. A shell from the Bismarck hit the ammunition area of the Hood, blew it up, and I think it killed about 1,400 people in it. It was a huge, huge loss, and it was a tremendous blow to the psyche. So Winston Churchill ordered the British Navy to sink the Bismarck at any cost. Doesn't matter how you go and do it. And this became, again, there's a big, big movie out there about the Bismarck. But these planes look really antiquated, don't they? Biplanes. They were called what do they call it? Stringbacks, and they look like they're not going to be able to do very much. But they found the Bismarck, and they went and they dropped bombs and launched torpedoes at it, and they couldn't sink the Bismarck. But what they did was they destroyed its rudder. So now the Bismarck could not sail and get away because the rudder was jammed over to one side. And they tried everything they could to work with one set of engines versus the other set of engines. But the British found them, and they blasted them, and down goes the mighty Bismarck. And this particular one, they decide they're going to meet over in Newfoundland on Roosevelt and Churchill come over, and they come up with a thing here, the Atlantic Charter, and they're agreeing how, again, we're not in the war, we're officially neutral, but the neutrality is becoming less and less. Interesting here, you probably all know that Roosevelt was stricken with polio. He had a very hard time walking, and you rarely ever see him doing that. So the newsreels, though, all covered up in fact. So you got that scene of him standing there. Most of the newsreel footage we're going to see of Roosevelt is sitting down because they didn't want the average American to know that their president was anything less than 100% fit and fighting and able to carry the war on. So in this particular one, they go off and they come to a pact that we're going to continue to help you. And again, officially neutral, but we'll do our best to help. And here's an idea of, again, how you can stretch neutrality. Britain had all these bases in Iceland, and they needed the troops and the ships that were there to do other work. So the Americans said, well, we can't go and fight the Germans for you because that would be against our neutrality. But if you want, we'll be the caretakers of your bases in Iceland. So all of a sudden, thousands of guys that had been stationed in Iceland to support the British Army and Navy were now replaced by Americans. And again, we weren't fighting, but if this freed up, I make up some number, 5,000 soldiers and sailors to go fight the Germans, off they went. This, of course, was not locked on Hitler. And this ship here, the USS Kearney, became a really big part of World War II. It was a destroyer, and it was going off to protect a convoy, and it got shot with a torpedo by the U-568. Severely damaged, and you can see some of it here. But Hitler used the Kearney as an excuse to declare war on America because the Kearney had the temerity to actually drop depth charges on a U-boat, and he didn't like that and said, well, that's not very neutral, and if you're going to drop depth charges on my U-boats, I'm going to declare open warfare on the United States. The Kearney was severely damaged. They got back to port, but it was, just stop this real quick. It was really interesting. The Kearney was basically brand new. They then they had done something very different on it. It had two sets of engines and propellers, but for the most part, the Navy ships at the time had if you had basically an aft, let's say a port or starboard propellers, they were generally in one engine room. You had boilers, and they were generally in one fire room. They had decided to try something new with the Kearney, and they had a port and a starboard engine room and a port and a starboard fire room. Well, when it got hit by the torpedo, it destroyed one side of the ship, but they were able to still sail it using the other side of the ship on one propeller. And they realized that if they had used the old design of just one engine room and the engine room took a hit, it would have been lost. So this became a big thing for the rest of the ships that were being designed in World War II to try to go to the split engine and fire rooms. Spitsbergen, a small Arctic island off the coast of Norway, and they had a very, very successful raid. This was a major coal port for Norway. Coal being very important. They also were bringing out iron ore, which is being sent over to Germany for steel. So the Canadians launched this attack on the island, and they basically came up and destroyed. You're going to see some big explosions coming up. They destroyed all the German radio stations here, which were sending out weather reports and sighting reports for the U-boats. So down they come. But they also blew up all the coal mines and the loading facilities at the docks and everything. Germans had no idea the Canadians had launched the raid. They were very successful in cutting off radio contact, basically destroyed everything in sight that they came there to do, I think with very, very little of any casualties. You can see the coal mines being destroyed. And then they offered anybody on the island that wants to go to England, we'll take you over there and let you go. And you can imagine if you were living under the German occupation and your main business was just destroyed, that going off to England would probably sound like a pretty good idea. So this very successful raid, and again, the Germans didn't want to mention it, but this was great propaganda for the U.S., and that sort of thing. This was interesting. 1941, a tremendous number of strikes held across the U.S. U.S. government ended up doing a report trying to figure out what was causing. As a matter of fact, the report's 51 pages long. And they were saying a lot of this was done by the German fifth columns, that the Germans, of course, are getting worried about the Americans coming into the war. So if you could start slowing down wartime production of all the planes and stuff we were sending to other countries, that would be a good thing. So it surprised me. The city that they said with the greatest number of strikes in 1941 was New York City. But they were all across the country, and a lot of them were at places that were industrial plants. This particular one, if you look, it's North American Aviation. That's the company that made the World War II plane that I flew for a number of years. But this, again, they were making all these planes, sending them overseas. So if you could slow down the production of airplanes for a while, you could be, the Germans could be helping their effort at the cost of your allies. So again, these newsreels go out trying to show everybody that you're hurting the U.S. X number of thousands of man hours lost. Roosevelt sending the troops to quell a lot of these strikes to get them back and going on. And this one's kind of interesting. The world's biggest bomber. This is the Douglas XB-19. And boy, if you watch this this newsreel, you're going to think this is one hell of an airplane, right? I mean, that sucker is massive. Well, it turns out it was massive, and it had about the flying characteristics of a Mack truck. The engines were severely underpowered. By the time they finished building it, they realized it was an Albatross. They tried to put other engines on it, and no matter what they did, it didn't fly very well at all. They decided that, well, maybe we can make cargo planes out of these because they're just not going to be good enough for bombers. Nope, they canceled it. They only built one XB-19, and it was eventually scrapped. So that was replaced by the Boeing B-17, which was a huge success, much more nimble, and basically the size, the plane, and the power of the engines were much better matched. So all these ships, again, are being built. They're sending over to England. They're doing everything they can to go off and replace the ones that are being lost. USS North Carolina, brand new battleship, fresh out of the yards. Again, showing the Navy might. The ship is still with us today. It's at a museum, and you can go visit it down in North Carolina. And I think they were saying these things shot shells the size of Volkswagens, and they could shoot them something like 36 miles. So you think about how powerful you'd have to throw a Volkswagen 36 miles. And their accuracy was actually quite amazing. They had a very preliminary fire control computer system on board. It was an analog computer, but they would take into account, the sea, how much it's bouncing up and down, the humidity, the temperature, the wind direction, all sorts of things. So these were very, very formidable ships indeed. And we go into Operation Barbarossa. Hitler's most giant, colossal mistake that he ever made was deciding that he was going to fight a war on multiple fronts and take on the Russians. So he launched this attack in there, and on June 22nd, 1941, the Nazis went off to attack the Russians, and it went on to a giant battle that ended up with more than 8 million people killed by the time the whole thing ended up. So, just how he thought he could take on two gigantic adversaries on either side simultaneously. What was interesting, this was less than 2 years after he had signed a mutual non-aggression pact between Germany and Russia. So Russia was really taken by surprise. They had thought that he was going to stay by the terms of his pact. The Western allies, U.S. and England, were warning Stalin that he's massing giant amounts of troop on your border. They chose not to believe it. So the first German successes were the first German raids were quite successful. Not everybody got away. You can see some being captured here, but they made some real inroads into Russia until Russia was able to turn around, regroup, and come back. What the Germans failed to realize was that the Russians were I guess you could say, gonna defend this thing. If they couldn't have a tank, they'd go and beat on you with wooden sticks. I mean, they were that determined. It's sort of like, seeing what's happening now with, everything going on over in Ukraine, they thought that the Ukrainians would just give in. No, they're fighting back tooth and nail. So if there's a part of the world, I guess it's not good to invade, it would be over in that area. So here they're doing everything they can to come up and sink these ships. We'll go by you, we'll throw a depth charge off of our ship, will explode next to yours, blowing up below the water line. It's going to crush your hull, and down you're going to go. So they did everything they could to sink the. Obviously you can't get that close to a warship to sink it, but you have to have supply ships, troop ships, that sort of thing, and they would go and do their best to sink those in any way they could. So that's the first one of these. Now the war has started in earnest. The Americans are in the war, and we're going off to, this is newsreel number 130. We're going off to the Marshall Islands. If you're not familiar with it, the Marshall Islands are pretty close to Australia and China and that sort of thing. But they were determined to take these over because we didn't have any planes that could go and bomb Japan at the time. We never had planes that could fly all the way from America to Japan, but they were working on the B-29, the long-range pressurized bomber, but they needed bases for it, and the Marshall Islands seemed to be a logical place to put it. So this is all very interesting because this is left after Pearl Harbor. We're in August of 1942. And in this period of time, they've already, what they did for troop ships was they commandeered every ocean liner, cruise ship they could get their hands on, and just, took out all the elegant staterooms, ballrooms, and just crammed them full of people, painted them in camouflage colors, and sent them off to war. But in this period of time, you have to stop and think about it. They had to have, they weren't drafting as many people. I mean, they were drafting them, but people were enlisting like mad. So they had to go and get all these people, train them. They had to get uniforms for them. They had to find food for them, places for them to sleep. So there were training camps all over the place, and they were just itching to bring the battle back to return it to Japan. What I found interesting, look at the guys, a couple guys still wearing fedoras and that, they're on their way to war, but they hadn't been sailors for probably more than a couple weeks at this point in time, and old habits die hard. So the Marshall Islands was, again, the map's going to come up, show us a location where they are. But up to this point in time, the Navy had been taking huge criticism for not attacking Japan. I mean, basically, the battleships were pretty much all destroyed at Pearl Harbor. And luckily, the Japanese made a huge critical error. They had not gone after the carriers. They really should have gone after the carriers more than they went after the battleships. But they also, the submarines were there. So we were waging war against the Japanese, but we had not really attacked the Japanese. We were basically, one ship here, one ship here, but this was the first time we went off for a major assault on them. So off they go. And again, a lot of these are kind of on the darker, grainy side, but a lot of these ships, a year ago this time, these ships didn't exist. It's amazing how they ramped up the manpower in the shipyards and everything to be able to staff and do this in such a period of time. So the Marshall Islands was a success for us. They had several different attacks that they did, because again, several different islands. But now you can see they're getting ready to do a bombardment. They had these are anti-aircraft guns, and the amazing fire rate on some of these things. After a while, the barrels would start glowing red. They were shooting so much. Some of them were watercolored, but yeah, Bull Halsey, who had very narrowly survived getting court-martialed for the Pearl Harbor situation. He's out there and he's taking personal command, and he's going to look up at the camera so we make sure we know that he's dead serious about it. But there's the Marshall Islands. You've probably heard of Wake Island, Guam, some of the others, and they're getting closer to Japan than we've ever been since the days of Pearl Harbor, up there to the right, Hawaii. So the pilots are getting ready to take off. Be interesting to know if any of these people, ever saw themselves. You hope they survived, and off they go. Radio teletypes. Down in the engine room. Full speed ahead, off we go. Boy, I tell you, I cannot imagine how loud that carrier deck had to be with all those planes going. Putting the bombs on them at the last minute, that way if anything went wrong and you got attacked, you didn't have your bombs sitting there on the flight deck. Loading up the machine guns. At this point, by the way, they were being very careful not to let you know the names of the ships for the most part. We're going to see another newsreel where they only refer to a ship as Carrier X, because the Japanese, of course, were very interested in knowing what ships they had hit, what ships had sunk, what ships were where, that sort of thing. So all these newsreels and everything were done with censorship in mind, that they often blocked out the details of which units were participating. Off they go. Some of these aircraft carriers were custom built for the war. In other cases, they took a cargo ship and put a big superstructure on top of the hull, and it served the job. So they also built what they call jeep carriers. I mean, the big fleet carriers, like seen here, could hold a giant, and one or two air wings. But they built these little ones called jeep carriers that could only hold a couple dozen planes. But if you could take one of those and build those in a couple weeks, as opposed to a fleet carrier in a couple months, you put them out there, and 10 planes at sea was better than no planes at sea. So they were adapting very, very quickly to the demands of war. These seaplanes, by the way, could not land back on the ship. So they would land near the ship, taxi up, and then a crane would pick them up and put them back up on their launching catapult. Now, I would not want to be on the receiving end of a battleship salvo. I mean, I think these were 16-inch guns, just massive things. These, again, the smaller ones are a combination of anti-aircraft and also ones that were used for shore embattlements. So they pulled up along the Marshall Islands, and the Japanese were really not expecting it, because the Americans had kept such a low profile. And one of the things they did was they just steamed up and down the length of the island, blasting everything in sight to destroy all the Japanese airfields and everything else. And when they got to the end, they turned around and blasted them from the other side of the ship. So I think this went on for about 2 weeks, up and down, back and forth. And you can imagine very, very hard for anybody to survive that sort of attack. Now this is interesting. Again, the footage here is amazing that what they did was they didn't just do this stuff for propaganda stuff. They did it for learning, what they were doing right or doing wrong. So a number of the airplanes had cameras in them so that they could try to figure out how our tactics are working. Our pilots, are we dropping our torpedoes too soon? Are we going too late? They had gun cameras in them, and they come back and they were able to get footage, in some cases, pretty amazing footage, diving right down on these ships. So in this particular one, they're shooting from the battleships, and they're able to get pictures of the Japanese carriers. And big win for us, sinking 16 warships. Not all those were giant capital ships. It was any sort of thing. They sunk a landing craft that went on the tally, but it was a major loss for the Japanese. It was basically the first big blow that we had against the Japanese Navy since Pearl Harbor. So this was a real morale booster to the Americans, both the ones fighting, but also the families back home that were now sacrificing with wartime rations. They were working in defense plants. Their sons and daughters had gone off to war and they hadn't seen them for a year. So it's these films did a tremendous thing for boosting U.S. morale. And we're going to see in a moment just how not everything goes right all the time. So again, they're just going up one coast, blasting, and coming back down the other. Look at the rate that thing's firing. And those are big shells. I mean, getting hit with one of those would certainly change your day. Now, some of these things you figure, well, he's shooting right here. He's not wearing a steel helmet. A lot of these things are being done for propaganda shots, of shooting the thing. In an actual combat situation, he'd be wearing, basically, hopefully they'd be wearing life preservers, black vests, steel helmets, that sort of thing. But whether they say don't let a good story get in the way of a better image, that sort of thing. There's one of these films, I don't remember which one it was, where the camera's up on the bow of the battleship, and every time the battleship fires, the entire thing, goes way to the left. I mean, it just shows, the power of the guns, that you can take something as huge as those battleships and just lurch the whole thing to the side. It's to me amazing that they had that sort of structural integrity, that you get all that stuff going on and not just have the turret come loose from the recoil. And here goes the bomber. He's going down. And he splashes in. Bounces, and he'll do it again.
Bill, I remember hearing that several, World War I and II movies used actual footage. They cut from, their mocked up
Right.
scenes to actual scenes from, and they came from reels like this.
Yeah, they also would sometimes shoot especially made footage for them, because they had all these new sailors, right? So they have to go off and train the sailors. So the Hollywood say, "Gee, could we have a picture of guys throwing depth charges off the back of a destroyer?" Yeah, I'll have it for you next Tuesday, and they would send you can see the thing shaking there. You could the relationship between Hollywood and the military was so good that at times, as long as we're training your guys, oh yeah, you want that footage? Yeah, we'll do that for you. But they definitely use real footage. And matter of fact, there's a later movie about this Carrier X, and again, they would not disclose what carrier was in this Battle of Midway. There's a whole movie and it's called Carrier X, and the the Navy came by and said, "Well, we can't let you use that ship because we're still repairing it. But here, let's film on another aircraft carrier during our training exercise." And they were able to get that movie out with great propaganda about how the ship's so severely damaged and everything else. But very, very definitely they were close cahoots with each other. That's an expression, close cahoots. Are there distant cahoots too? Anyway, I don't know.
Bill, Bill,
Yeah,
don't forget, John Ford was in the Navy when he shot footage at Midway.
yes. Matter of fact,
Out of
it's
town.
one of the upcoming newsreels. Thanks for mentioning that. He had enlisted in the Navy. He was a commander, and it was important enough that when he got to his film footage, it says shot by John Ford. Let me get to the next one here. So Midway, huge battle. Again, huge important battle for World War II, and this again was there's a big movie by the name. This was a real surprise for the Japanese because again the Americans had not done an awful lot to go off and attack them. Well, they were rebuilding like crazy, but they came to the Battle of Midway, and the long and short of it is that the Americans had cracked the Japanese code to a large extent. They were not 100% successful in reading every version of it, but they had a pretty good idea of where the Japanese were and what they were doing, where they were going. So they started forming a task force to attack them at Midway. But the issue is there. What do you do to how do you get your Navy and their Navy to meet without their Navy knowing your Navy's coming? And how do you get them in the right spot at the right time? So the U.S. was very, very careful in sending out a convoy of getting all the ships out there, radio silence, bringing them out there. They now have a general idea where the Japanese are. So they decide, well, we're going to have to go off and find them in particular. This is the sort of thing, again, the footage where they would cooperate, have the two ships sail so close together. There's a cruise liner converted to a troop ship. In general cases, you would not have two ships sailing that close together unless they were doing a transfer between ships of personnel or fueling. But it looks really good for the war, that sort of thing. So anyway, Midway, they come by and they start scouting the area and sending up American spotter planes, and they go and they spot and there's General MacArthur. They spot the Japanese, but they wanted the Japanese to think they were all in one particular area. Well, most of them were in another area. So you send one ship out and have that guy make sure he gets seen, and the Japanese all say, "Oh, wow, they're over that way. Let's start heading that way," which takes them right across the path of where your main force is waiting to attack. So the Battle of Midway was a huge success for the Americans. It was a giant Japanese carrier, one of their battleships. This is a good one. The guy's landing gear was not working, so he's going to come in with a belly landing. So it was a huge success to come in and be able to do this. Well, that particular part of the ocean is so deep that they were not able to the graves of the ships are down about I think it's about 3 to 4 miles deep. I mean, way down there. Actually, it might even be deeper than that. but Robert Ballard found some of the ships. Another expedition went back and found some of them. But it was like I said, huge success for us. Darwin on the coast took the first of the Japanese attacks. Luckily, they did not get attacked over and over. This was a kind of a daring raid by the Japanese, but by this point in time, we're starting to come up and start attacking them. So they were no longer able to go anywhere they wanted, do anything they wanted. The tolls, that the cost of doing this started becoming a bit prohibitive to them. Throwing off camouflage netting, bringing the guns to bear. Lots of manual labor involved. The idea with these shells, of course, is that you're not going to necessarily go up and hit the plane and explode, but you go up and you have a fuse in the air to explode in the air and have tremendous amounts of shrapnel, hopefully exploding directly in the path of the ships, the planes rather. This was pretty much the first giant slugfest between the British, the American and the Japanese navies. The British had, of course, we saw earlier them sinking the Bismarck, but that pretty much had been, one ship against several other ships. This one was several other ships against several other ships, so it was a bigger. A lot of the other ones, like the Bismarck, was a very one-sided battle. This was a very two-sided battle with aircraft carriers on both sides, battleships on both sides, airplanes on both sides. It was a truly massive undertaking. But again, we basically caught them by surprise, and we were able to position our ships. There's a thing in naval warfare where they call it crossing the T, where if you're able to get the other guys that you're attacking to go directly across where you're going, and you can give them a broadside, but they're coming at you and they can only attack you from the front. Most of the ships have the heavy armament to go to the port and starboard, not fore and aft. So if you can position that you're getting them and they're coming at you straight on, and you can blast them with everything you've got from your side, and they can only blast you from head on. It's very much a tactic to try to trick them into, and it worked out very well in this particular engagement. So basically, the Japanese came by and they sailed right into the trap.
They look so excited as they're heading out, and not all of them are going to come back.
Yep, absolutely. That's the sad start. You watch these and you think about these 24-year-old guys running off to jump in their plane and never coming back, and what they may have achieved in life, and who they left behind, that sort of stuff. So the aircraft carrier Lexington, it's doing pretty well until it gets hit by a plane. The mighty Lex was one of the big fleet carriers that were built for the war, and it got hit by a plane. This was before the days of kamikazes, but they had shot at a plane, and it came in and smashed into the Lexington and set it on fire. It was a what you call it, an accidental collision, but they had quite a fire and quite an effort to try to save it.
So, Bill, do you think that Castle was the guy who wrote all these interstitial titles and stuff? He took
Yeah, yeah,
the wrong stuff.
he pretty much did it. And what you call it, they did it with all the exclamation marks, the power. One of the things, so you can see this thing is just burning like mad. I mean, it was a huge, huge thing. Now, is it going to survive? Well, you can find out the answer to it because the USS Lexington display ship in Corpus Christi, Texas today. But yeah, this guy had, like I said, pretty much a one-man band, and so it worked out really well. I mean, again, I mentioned earlier he had salespeople and that sort of thing, but he did all the editing of these things. He did the titles, whether he wrote them, whether he optically composed them or not. But then he wrote the script that went with it, and you could buy the movie, and father could be running it in the living room, and he could be reading from the script. And I have a segment from one of the scripts here. For this one, an enemy plane is spotted swooping down on the mighty flat top. Anti-aircraft guns mark the warning, but the Nipponese airmen throw caution to the winds. They're hit on the after deck. The port side, a bomb bursts through. Under clouds of black smoke, 2 Jap planes dive to a smoldering, watery end. Another dawn breaks through the tropical skies. Carrier X again gives battle. Again, the Japs swoop from the clouds. Again, our anti-aircraft guns pepper the sky with tracer bullets, each carrying bad news to the invaders. Uncle Sam's gunners are straight shooters. The Japs find this out in this fight to the finish. I mean, real rousing stuff he was writing. But it worked. Like I said, these were huge sellers. He did quite well with these. That's from one. That's one called Russia Strikes Back, and in fact, the USS Yorktown. And again, luckily, a lot of these ships have been preserved. The Yorktown survived the attack, and it got hit pretty bad. Another one, but the Yorktown went on to a later career. It was the recovery ship for Apollo 8, the first guys that circled the moon. And unfortunately, William Enders, who took the famous picture of the Earthrise, he died yesterday in a vintage plane crash off the coast of Seattle. So a sad tie-in there. But yeah, these are massive ships, and in some cases, the people are able to get off. In other cases, some of them sunk very, very quickly. Like when the Hood got hit, that was a tremendous blow to the British Navy. I mean, one shell from the Bismarck hits it and it blows up, 1,400 guys dead. But the ship was only 2 months old. I mean, it was huge fanfare. The Hood, the mighty Hood, the Hood is gone, and they lost several others in close proximity at that point in time. So these sea battles are just massive events.
Not that it was a sea battle, but essentially the Arizona went the same way. One of the bombs dropped on it, went into the magazine and exploded, and just the whole ship just lifted off the water in a sense and broke its back.
Yeah. So yeah, after what happened with the Hood, they realized, just as you said, that one bomb could go right down and do terrible stuff. So at that point, they realized maybe we ought to increase the armor plating directly above our ammo magazines. And both the British and the American Navy went on a real retrofit craze of preventing that because of what had happened with the Hood in the Arizona.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Have any of these ships that were destroyed or sunken, have they ever actually been any excavation or anything taken to try and pull up any artifacts or anything?
Yeah, like these are so far down, the next one possible to get to. But what happened is there's a in World War I, they had a famous thing with the the Germans, they made them basically give up their fleet. They took it in, and the Germans scuttled it. Place up Scapa Flow up in Scotland. So they were all these ships down there, and then the Japanese had a big bunch of them that got sunk at an atoll called Kwajalein. And it was really interesting because people started realizing that there's an awful lot of steel down there, and evidently what made the steel of these ships very valuable was that they were sunk before the days of the atomic bombs going off. So they said these are very what you call pristine sorts of metals, because with all the atomic radiation that was done for all the testing and everything, they said the stuff that was done before that has a better thing for medical purposes than after. They started raising a lot of these ships. There's one guy, for Scapa Flow, went off and bought the rights to the German fleet, which most of them had turned turtle and sunk upside down, with their masts into the ground. And he bought the German fleet for like peanuts. I mean, absolute pennies on the dollar. And everybody said, you're crazy. And he went out and raised a whole bunch of them. And he basically would go down to the ship and build up a giant pipe that would go from the bottom of the ship up above the surface, put in an airlock, and the divers would go down and compartment by compartment, seal off the portholes and pump it full of air, go on to the next one. And he brought up these giant German ships and was able to get quite a bit of money for selling the metal of them. There's a big issue going on in places now, like off of Laos and some of the others, where they've been ripping up ships right now for scrap metal. They basically don't go down and dive on them so much to bring up relics or artifacts, but they go down and they blow them up with explosives, and then they just use giant nets to try to bring up as much of the metal. And they're you can imagine, rightly so, the Royal Navy is just pissed as hell that these are war graves, and these guys are just blowing them apart because they want the scrap metal out of them.
Bill,
Yeah,
there are two sites. You mentioned Scapa Flow. People still dive that lagoon,
yep,
to use a specific term. A good friend of mine that I worked with in hyperbaric medicine has actually done several dives at Scapa Flow. But there's one other that you didn't mention. It's called Truck Lagoon.
right.
The Japanese had their merchant fleet there, and the Americans bombed it. Now, to dive that site, usually I was on a waiting list for 2 years to do a dive, a 1-week trip there, and circumstances changed and I couldn't do the trip. But essentially, it takes 2 days to get there. You fly to Hawaii, and then you fly to the island. And what's interesting enough is they always take a mechanic on the plane to the island in case there's a problem with the plane and it can't get back. Originally, when Truck opened as a dive site, the gentleman who ran the site was fanatic that no one takes anything off of the wrecks. And it stayed pristine for about 20 years until he turned the operation over to his family. Unfortunately, now it's a mess.
Oh,
Recreational divers can go down to 130 feet. They will see some of the wrecks. The technical divers who go deeper can see a few items. And if you Google it, you'll see that there's a crane that they nicknamed R2-D2 because it looks like it in the movie. But the family, they destroyed the site. It used to be pristine. All the relics were still in place. Boots from the Japanese merchant sailors. There are personal items, but little by little, it's all gone.
that's a shame. You mentioned it. We do have the last one of these I have. I'm not going to get through all these that I did today, but the last one I have is Yank Smash Truck, so we can go to look at that. Yeah, I mean, I had thought at one point about diving in Scapa Flow might be real interesting. until I realized, first of all, it's definitely a dry suit sort of environment.
Oh, yes.
You know,
Yes.
and I was a wetsuit diver, but you know, you started looking at some of the conditions. It's not exactly crystal clear, you know, pristine water too. So they said you go down and visibility might be 8 inches or something. And that didn't sound like it was going to be a lot of fun. And I did think about Truck Lagoon because I do know somebody that went there. And so Jack, that Carol and I dove with, had been there, and he was raving about it. But again, I looked at the logistics of getting there, and the cost of getting there at the time was astronomical, and
Yes.
decided that was I'll just have to live vicariously through those who have done it.
We had planned, my wife and I, we were going to go to Hawaii for a week, and I was going to go up the truck because she doesn't dive, and she was going to come home. And unfortunately, circumstances changed, and I couldn't do the trip. The only saving grace was the $1,000 deposit I had to put forward, and I knew I was going to lose part of it. And I called the operator. I said, "Yeah, I know I'm going to lose." He goes, "Oh no," he goes, "I guarantee you, you gave me enough notice. I'll have this spot sold in 10 minutes." He goes, "I'll be in touch." And not 20 minutes later, he called me back. And he says, "You're getting a full refund. I sold your slot."
Oh wow, that's really great. You know,
Yeah,
these days they would just sell the slot to somebody else anyway. So
it's a it's a beautiful island from what I've been told, and the diving is still pretty good, but unfortunately, the wrecks are nowhere near as pristine as they were.
yeah, that's the trouble, you know, people go and they said, "Oh, I'll just," it's like people that dive on a you know, ship and say, "I'll just take this plate home, you know, there's 1,000 on board." Well, when 1,000 guys all take one plate, pretty soon there's an empty room left.
The Andrea Doria.
Yeah, yeah, you know, the guy Jack I mentioned, he dove on the Andrea Dory the day after it sunk. And we were out on the dive boat one day talking to him about it, and he said it was the the scariest dive he'd ever done. And he did a lot of diving for taking pictures for Life and Look and other magazines and that. But he said the Andrea Dory was still creaking and groaning, and you know, as things were still collapsing inside. And he said, you know, all of a sudden, giant things of air or fuel and everything would rush past you. And he said, what was really scary was deck chairs and stuff would break loose, and they'd be shooting to the surface because they were buoyant. And you're down there, and all of a sudden, someone shoots by you in the shadows. But he said, what really scared the crap out of him, he looked through a porthole, and there was a face looking back at him. And he said, "Oh my God, it's, you know, a victim of the ship." And he said he just about inhaled his mouthpiece, and he realized it was a store mannequin that was just bobbing against the window, looking at the other side. But
Yeah.
yeah,
What's
he
his
talked
last
about
name?
that dive.
What's his last name?
I don't recall offhand. I do remember his girlfriend's name was Fifi. She was French, and I can't recall what Jack's last name was off the
I
top of.
think I know who that is. I think I've read about him
Yeah,
because I know
fascinating.
about the dive that was done the next day that Doria went down. And I think
Yeah.
I recall his name. I clearly remember the details of that dive. It was actually funded by R.H. Macy,
Oh, was it? Okay.
as I recall, yes.
Yeah, no, he had gone to all sorts of places. He was a really nice guy to chat with. The thing I got a kick out of was, you know, sitting there, you know, watching between dives, having a cigarette, thinking, you know, that's really good for your
Yeah.
lungs, Jack.
Ugh.
But yeah, no, I do remember, like I said, they were fascinating people to talk to, and you know, you have lots of time to kill between dives, you know, out on the boat and stuff. And his girlfriend, I just thought, you know, what a typical French name, Fifi, right?
Yeah. Have you guys ever been to Plymouth Rock?
Years and years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, I said something about, I can't believe how small it is. And the guy says, "Oh, it used to be absolutely huge." It's like they, you know, people were selling, you know, take home a souvenir from Plymouth Rock
Yeah,
until there's almost nothing left of it. It's, yeah, same idea.
yeah, no, that's the trouble, you know. I mean, they have all these things that are there's a group on Facebook called Abandoned Places in New York, and one of the rules is you can post all the pictures you want, but you can't tell anybody where it is. So like, sometimes you can tell it's Grossinger's in the Catskills or something, but there's all these abandoned factories and schools and insane asylums and everything else. And if that's the trouble, as soon as you tell everybody where it is, everybody goes there and tears it, shreds it, vandalizes it, does all sorts of terrible stuff to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you were talking about, Tom, Yosemite, the other half of Half Dome used to be there, but all the tourists took chips of it with them.
Good one.
Well, I was just thinking, if I had a big rock, at your house you wanted to get rid of, that'd be one way to do it. Matter of fact, speaking of rock, remember people remember the episode of Mary Tyler Moore show? They have the giant rock in their basement. It's a
No.
classic episode. They go down in the basement and there's this
That
giant.
was the Dick Van Dyke Show, not Mary Tyler
Oh,
Moore.
sorry, Dick Van Dyke. Yeah, right. Thank you. They've got this tremendous boulder in their basement, and why don't you take it out of there? Well, it's too expensive because it's take that out, the whole fault line's going to collapse, that sort of thing. But in Connecticut, there's this guy Stu. I'm trying to remember his last name. Famous market company.
Oh yeah, Stu Leonard.
Stu Leonard. Yeah, his store is built around a giant rock for exactly that reason. They got there and wanted to build a store, and it was just too expensive to do it. So Stu got really smart. He started selling off pieces of rock, but he realized the rock you could buy in the store were not pieces of the rock, because he didn't want to lose their rock. So he just would go out to some local place, get a truckload of 100 pounds of rock and put it in a bag and sell it to people.
Funny.
Now, what's interesting,
Yeah.
when I was at Warner Brothers, we were trying to come up with a way to talk about customer service. And I heard about Stu Leonard. So I invited him to talk about customer service. And his son came in and he gave this really, really great speech about, the customer's always right. We do this and do that. And how they were making money hand over fist because of great customer service. And I thought this was a great motivational speaker, right? About 3 months later, the father gets arrested for tax evasion. Turned out he had 2 sets of books. And that's how he was being so successful. He wasn't paying taxes on his damn business. So boy, did I eat crow at that for Warner Brothers about, hey, Bill, maybe we should have 2 sets of books too. We could be better.
Yeah.
But yeah, Stu Leonard.
My mom was on Stu Leonard's customer advisory board.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I've been to the store many times.
Well, I got a kick out of the son admitting that the rocks they sold were not the real rock. They were
That's funny. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, just from some this is interesting. Landmines are set. It's amazing. They're still every now and then finding some of this stuff buried out there in the desert, and sometimes it still goes off. So I love this guy. Imagine your job
Counting on it.
to pound the top down on the landmine.
God.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about how long these wars lasted and how many people were disrupted from their families, entire villages and towns and cities destroyed. And even if you had a desk job, that you were sent someplace and you didn't come home for 4 years or so. I mean, just mind-boggling to think about, the cost in so many ways, the dollar cost, but the human cost and the psyche cost. I mean, again, with what you call it, D-Day 2 days ago, wanted to mention a fellow named Joe Argenzio. Joe was one of my dad's best friends. And Joe was, we just knew Joe for years. He was in charge of the volunteer fire department band and everything. And didn't know much about Joe, but turned out he was the youngest guy to go ashore on D-Day. He had enlisted in the Navy at age 15. He had forged his birth certificate and ran away from home, joined the Navy, and off he went. And again, it was documented. He was the youngest guy to go ashore. I think he was 16, maybe just turned 17, something like that. But he never talked about the war until I mentioned I had been at Dachau, and he was one of the troops that liberated it. but Joe ended up getting a award from the French government for his bravery being there. And when Joe died, the speaker at his funeral was the French ambassador to the United States. But they flew Joe and his wife Joan over to Germany for one of the to France rather, for one of the celebrations. And like I said, we just never thought, that Joe, I until he finally mentioned it, I'd known the guy 30 something years, and he had never mentioned, World War II once, or, I don't think it ever come up. And, again, the youngest guy to go ashore on D-Day, just absolutely astonishing that it was just, he was just Dad's best friend. You never knew he was in the war.
Bill, you know that Robert Sherman was the first American GI to walk into Dachau, right?
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was interesting because Joe was there, and let me pull up the next one, just start that. It was interesting because I was mentioning that it was such a somber place. I had to put away my camera. I just didn't feel like I could play tourist there. And he said that they got there, and it was just worse. And here we go for truck. It was worse than anything they could have possibly imagined. And he said it was really interesting that a bunch of the German guards had tried to mix in with the prisoners, and he said
Right.
it was really easy to tell who it was because all the prisoners were matchstick men, and the German guards had been relatively well fed. So they pulled out all the German guards and said, took them off to the side and said, we don't want to deal with this. When the officers get here, it's going to be a real mess. So just get out of here. And the Germans said, we can go. I said, yeah, just run away. And as they ran away, they cut them down with 50 caliber machine guns. And I said, oh, geez, Joe. I mean, that's wow. Thinking about My Lai and that sort of stuff, where you're concerned about war crimes. And he said, if you had set foot in that camp and saw what we'd see, you knew that nobody was going to shed a tear for a Nazi. And that was all he ever said about it.
Yeah, we spent the entire day there, and it's so sad and so depressing. It's just, yeah,
Yeah, I was
definitely.
there on a very gray, gloomy, misty day, which, just, added to the ambiance. And I remember, thinking, looking out across the fence at the houses across the street, how the hell do you live in a town with that, just across the street from me? Like, I live across the street from a park. I look out and I see trees. These people would look out and they'd see, that terror across the street. And the smell of the crematoriums and everything else. And even to the day when I was working in Munich, people in Dachau would register their cars in Munich because they didn't want the license plates had the letter for the city that you were registered in. And they all wanted to get an M for Munich. They didn't want to get a D for Dachau because just the shame of the whole experience of what had happened there. So here's Truck Lagoon, as again, when mentioned, major thing, that huge installation there for supplying the rest of the Japanese Navy all around there. So all sorts of cargo ships, troop ships in there. Some of this footage was shot from attacking B-25s, and they got some great footage. And it shows up over and over. There's one shot here where they're coming right down on top of a cargo ship out there, and I've seen that footage in different movies, different shows like Black Sheep Squadron, all over the place. And it's just you see it on TV, and it's all part of some action adventure show. But in real life, man, that guy's dive bombing that B-25, like he's flying it like it's a fighter plane, and he's just going against these ships. And these ships, a lot of them had guns on them and were firing back. So you're not just shooting ducks at these guys. They had some pretty intensive armament on some of them to defend themselves. You can see all sorts of planes scattered around on the airfield, and then they come in. Obviously, the first thing you want to do is blast their airfield and destroy it as much as you can so they can't take off against you. And it was one of the things they learned over time. It was not as important to shoot up the planes on the ground, which was really good if you could destroy them. But the most effective thing you could do at first was to bomb the airfield itself, because if you have a plane, that's great. You can have 100 planes, that's even better. But if you don't have a runway to take them off on, that was really bad. So they were able to do an awful lot of damage, to the airfields. And then the second wave would go in against the planes. Well, the Americans realized the Japanese were doing that. They were bombing our plane runways left and right. So the Navy SEALs would basically, pre-position bulldozers along the edges of the runways. And they were really smart that when the runways got cratered, they didn't have to pave them. They would just go and take coral, round up coral, shove them out there and fill up the holes with, coral. The planes would be able to take off on that as well as of a paved runway. They also had steel runways where they would replace the sections with, you blow up a hole and 2 hours later I've replaced it and off we go. So there was a constantly evolving, warfare and tactics. And like I said, you sometimes learn from your mistakes, and sometimes you don't. But it was truck. Yeah, truck was a major battle. We're going to see coming up again some of the cargo ships taking a hit. That had to hurt. So obviously a ship hit here, burning quite well. You can imagine a lot of these things were floating bombs. I mean, some of these ships are just loaded with munitions, explosives, highly flammable aviation fuel. So when they took a hit, they didn't last very long. He liked his. I always feel when I'm reading these captions, like reading comic books. Comic books always have the captions ending in exclamation marks. So anyway, here's the ships out in the lagoon. You can see how clear the water is because you can see all the reefs and everything down below. So from a dive point of view, like here, it said here's some of the footage that's just amazing. This B-25 is just diving out, and those dots coming back up. There's shots coming up from the ship. There's tracers from the ship. They're trying just as hard to hit that plane as that plane was trying to hit the ship. So they had Dauntless dive bombers, they had B-25s, Hellcats. They had all sorts of stuff out there.
Bill, there's a really good book that covers in a fictional setting what happened during some of these wars by Herman Wouk. It's called War and Remembrance. And he goes
Oh,
into
yeah.
quite a bit of detail about the Battle of Midway. I've probably read that book about 10 times and I still find new stuff in it.
Yeah, they made a TV movie out of that, didn't they?
Yeah, I think the book's better, but yeah.
Right. No, I remember seeing the movie. I hadn't read the book. I'll have to look at this ship, how that pounding that thing is taking. I mean, you can imagine why the lagoon is littered in ships now. I mean, 19 of them down at the bottom. Here's another one. I've seen this footage in show after show again. We're almost to the end of this segment. You can imagine being on this destroyer and you're just going crazy because, again, ships don't turn like airplanes do. So you go as fast as you can dodge to the left, dodge to the right, but you're not going to be able to outrun or outmaneuver these attacking airplanes. one attacking airplane's bad enough, but if 20 of them are coming at you, the odds are they're gonna get you. Yeah, you can imagine the issues of gunfire. You can't just shoot straight and at the target right in front of you because he's moving, you're moving. So you have to figure out how fast he's going, how fast you're going, and how far to aim in front of him. And of course, between the time you push the button and the time your bullets leave your plane, if he's going to turn, or go up or down or whatever. So the whole science, even the dropping bombs. I mean, you guys may have heard about the Norden bombs. Oh, there's another footage. This one here, this poor ship's been in, I don't know how many movies. I mean, they just come right down over it. For the Norden bomb site, again, you're flying along and you have to drop these bombs, and they're going to come down in a certain arc. Well, not all bombs weigh the same. Your incendiaries weigh different than your high explosives, which weigh different from your dam busters. So you got to put all that into a real primitive by today's computers. How these things are going to work. When I worked for the Navy, they had invented a language, and it's funny things you remember, called jovial. Joule's own version of the International Algebraic Language. And it had been a computer language for analog computers that basically for doing gunfire trajectories and for battleships, destroyers, that sort of thing. And I made the mistake one day on a day, of quiet, nothing to do. I found a jovial manual and I figured out how jovial worked. Well, the next thing I know is I get this thing that the Navy would like me to go to Turkey and start training the Turkish Navy on some destroyers that the US Navy was going to give the Turkish Navy. And I thought, oh, that sounds really interesting. That's a kind of interesting assignment. I guess learning jovial wasn't too bad. Then they made the mistake of mentioning to me that I'd get this beautiful, villa by the ocean. Oh, that was really nice and everything. And my own chef, and oh, that was going to be really nice. And my own bodyguard. And I said, what do I need a bodyguard for? Well, at that time, they were taking people out of Turkish bases and tying them up to fences. And the guerrillas that didn't like the Turkish government were executing American military men. And I said, I don't remember as much about jovial as I thought I did. I turned that assignment down real quick. So I don't know who they or went, but I thought it was a typical brilliancy of the US Navy was take a submarine designer and decide you're going to send them to Turkey to teach people how to shoot destroyer guns. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else on this particular reel. I think we're going to end real soon. Again, I found it interesting with these films, by the way, if anybody is a real enthusiast, I do not intend to keep these in my collection. I don't have enough space for them all. I've digitized the 17 of them, and I'll be, if there's anybody that's a real enthusiast, let me know. I'll be glad to let them go to another happy home. I'm just glad, from my point of view, that the woman didn't just trash them out. Particularly the metal box she had that she couldn't get open. It just took a small screwdriver to pop it open. But there were 6 more reels of film in there and 1 empty film can. And, like I said, you never know when you get some of these lots of film what you're going to find. Never made a carrier landing, and I think it would scare the crap out of me to do it. Some guys in the group, the Condor Squadron that I fly with, were able to do a carrier takeoff. They were reenacting the raid of Doolittle's raid, and they wanted to have some planes take off from, I think it was the Hornet. And the Navy said, well, we won't let you land on it, but we'll let you take off from it. So they did a whole bunch of practicing of short field takeoffs And they were able you had to be able to prove that you could take your plane off within X distance of feet. And then the Navy let them do it, and they took about a dozen planes off of the celebration of the Doolittle raid, and let them take it off. And one guy had been a pilot, a carrier pilot in the Navy, not World War II. It was after that, Korean War or something. But he said he was scared, absolutely so scared to death, taking off on that one. And I said, why? He said, you told me it had 30, 40 carrier landings. He goes, yeah, and those 30, 40 carrier landings, they own the plane. I didn't. If I broke it, they paid for it. So it was a different perspective for him once he was taking his plane off. But he made it. He did it okay. So anyway, just a little thing for today to honor the men and women that did so much that got us to where we are. And you know, again, the whole celebration of D-Day. I was over there for the 40th celebration, which was just by coincidence. I happened to be working in London, and another guy from I was at Warner's, a guy at Disney, said, "Hey, why don't we go over and you know, see if we can see anything?" And it was a hell of a thing when you as soon as they realized you were American, you couldn't buy a drink for the entire weekend. It was great. But yeah, I got to go to shore, you know, to the shores of Normandy and Omaha Beach and Juno Beach and Gold, and it was fascinating to be there. And a lot of veterans had come back and were there in town for it too. Let me just look at the chat here. Okay.
Bill, I was wondering, these films, when they first came out, how clean were they? I mean, because and you said you haven't cleaned these up or anything, but these are a lot of these film shots were pretty rough and a lot of grain to them and stuff like that. And I have seen better quality shots. I don't know if that's just because of the age of the film you were working with.
Yeah, a combination of things. It's really interesting. When Castle was saying he can get the films cheaper than the raw film, I think his 8mm stock that he used was grade B on some of this stuff. I have seen the same films that were shot on 16mm that look absolutely wonderful. And some of it's done with like the was it the FDR Museum has a bunch of them on board on their site. And I think some of them, you look at them, I think they've been done with digital grain reduction, but they're really nice, and they have sound again because the 16mm versions were done. And this particular one, I think the 8mm stuff was, it was shot on 16 overseas. The real combat footage was dubbed down to 8, and I don't think they did the best particular job of going down to 8. When you go on YouTube and that sort of thing, most of the 8mm versions of these things look pretty ratty. The 16mm ones look pretty good. So I think it's the stock he was using. And again, from my point of view, I imagine most of these, they were screened once, maybe twice, and then stuck in a box and went into a garage. In the particular ones that I got, the metal boxes where the outsides were rusted like crazy. I mean, it looks like they'd been underwater for a month. The insides, they were pretty well airtight, though. The insides were not rusted. The cans themselves were not rusted. I mean, I've just got them sitting right here, and like I said, there's no discoloration or anything to them whatsoever, and the inside is just great. So now they could have been in cardboard boxes, which they were shipped in. I don't know when he ever stuck them in here, but yeah, this one was the last one I scanned, the truck one. And the prints themselves are in, from a physical point of view, they're not that physically dirty, but a lot of the dirt on them is, I think, printed on them because again, they were just running these things off like a bat out of hell to get them out and sell them. So, but yeah, they're definitely not pristine, cinema versions. I'm just reading through here. Oh, okay, let's see. Castle. Oh, okay. Yeah, I never saw that movie Matinee. So William Castle, portrayed by John Goodman. Okay. I've not been to the little White House in Warm Springs. It's something that when we get down to Georgia, I have to think about it. And so we're talking about with his trying to hide the fact that he was handicapped, right? And yeah, Scott mentioned the carriers and the date. It's when Pearl Harbor was done, that a lot of the carriers out doing sea exercises, war games, that sort of stuff. And that was a big thing. The Japanese really should have said, "What's late for a day that they come back to port?" And I think they were only due back in port a couple days later. And they had, if it was if Pearl Harbor Day had been like December 14th or something, it could have been a whole different war. It really would have been a giant mess. The Battle of Midway, it's a great movie. If you get a chance to watch the movie Battle of Midway, it's really well done, and they go into a lot about the code breaking and how tough it was, because it's bad enough to break a code in a language but they were going crazy trying to find Japanese people that could help them break the code. And at this point, of course, we're in a thing, we're locking up every Japanese citizen and putting them at the concentration camps. So, hey, any Japanese want to help us? It was a huge effort that they were able to break that and get it. Just like they had the the counterpart in England, where they were breaking the German Enigma code, Bletchley Park, and all the work they did on that. I mean, if you go and visit anything like the NSA, the National Security Agency, and there are nation's code breakers, it's amazing to me what these guys can do. Rich Herring left, but he would have linked President Reagan's speech at Pointe du Hoc in 1984. Like I said, I just happened to be there. We went over there, and it was crazy. There were all sorts of people running around with World War II Jeeps left and right. The funny part was we went into the town of I think it was St. Lo. There's a scene in the movie where a paratrooper played by Red Buttons comes down, and he's hung up on the church steeple, and he's pretending that he's dead. And the church, in real life, this happened. The church bells are going. They finally, get down, and the character is, what? Because he's had the church bells going off next to him. Well, we're in the town, and they decided to show the movie The Longest Day, right? This is great. And a lot of the people in the town played themselves as villagers shot in there. And so we watched it, and it was really confusing, because the way they'd done the movie was, you'd have the Germans all speaking German with English subtitles, and the Americans, of course, when we see it, there's no subtitles. Well, now I'm watching a French version of it. So all the French people, there's no subtitles, right? But now all the Americans, there's subtitles and everything. But they would get up, like the mayor of the town would jump up, and he'd run up to the screen, he'd point, that's him, and he's running across, and he's doing this. And another woman would run up, and she's all yelling, and that sort of thing. So we got through that whole section of the movie, and then they stopped and they rewound it, and they watched it again because they all wanted to see themselves. But it was really a crazy thing, just sitting in this town, and like I said, the guy's hanging from the steeple, the dummy up there, and all these people are running around, and boy, the wine was flowing. It was really a tremendous, it was really a wonderful event to be there and to be at. But a friend of mine used to joke about all the time. We had a German friend that we worked with, a really nice guy, Hans Frunchek. And he said on D-Day, Hans used, and I mentioned how they ran the movie backwards. And this guy, Bob, said, yeah, every day on the anniversary of D-Day, Hans runs the entire movie backwards, so it ends well for the Germans. So, but yeah, being over there was just like I said, I've got a lot of pictures. I took a whole bunch of pictures over there, and I could pull them out someday. It was really, when you're standing at like Pointe du Hoc and you're looking down where the Rangers came up over that hill, and a lot of the old barbed wire from World War II is still rusty and scattered all over. But you're thinking, man, that's a hell of a hill to climb in any circumstance. And you got to carry it with a hell of a lot of ammunition, heavy guns, and everything else. And the guys overhead are, doing everything they can to shoot you, drop rocks over, throw grenades. I can't imagine. My mind just blanks at how the hell you get through stuff like that. So yeah, there's all sorts of movies on these things, and like I said, I just wanted to share some of them in honor of the folks that let us be where we are today. So next week, I don't think we're going to be doing a talk. Brock, I should be seeing you for lunch next week, I believe.
Yep.
So I got your slides. I've got I think 8 more to go, and I'll be done.
Okay.
Bill, do you know our
Yes.
friend Leslie owns a airplane hangar.
No, really, where, in Utah?
Yes. It'd easily hold a B-17 or maybe 6 to 10, small planes, single engine planes. It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
I didn't know that. I'll have to ask you,
Yeah.
you know what town it's in?
Well, it's in what would it be called? Saratoga Springs.
Oh, okay.
And on both sides of the hangar there are workshops that run the full length of the hangar that are huge. That you could drive a semi in them. The thing is just absolutely gigantic.
Yeah, my brother Kevin was in the Marine Corps, and he was down at El Toro. He was both at El Toro and then the other air base where they just had the fire a year or so ago. And he said they used to bring, they were built as giant blimp hangars, and they would bring the Goodyear blimp in, and would just be this way down at the other end. You can barely see it. And he said the hangars are so big that when they were working on the helicopters, they would start them up, lift them up, fly them to the other end of the hangar, and put it back down to do some other work in the other section of it. I can imagine flying a helicopter inside a building, but I mean, those things were massive. I mean, just phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, with some of these films, like I said, the only film footage I think I've seen of what was the name of that really crappy plane, the XB, whatever the biggest XB-19, the Douglas
19.
19. I mean, again, you wonder, some of these things look so great on paper, and you put it together, and it's just a dog. And
Yeah.
I have had the pleasure of flying a number of World War II planes. I had the T-6 for 30 something years. I've flown a P-51. I've flown a B-17, and I cannot imagine, what it took to fly those things in combat situations. Just astonishing. So the B-17 is one heavy plane for a little guy like me to fly. And they said that the XB-19 was just about, unmanageable under any circumstances.
Did you see the show on, I think it was Apple Plus, the Masters of the Air?
No,
About the
I
beast?
had, that's on my to-do list. I
It's
understand
good.
it's well done, but a lot of CGI.
Yeah, there is. I mean, you can tell there's real planes, and you tell other shots that had to be CGI. There's no way they put that many planes up, but there were a few real planes on the ground and stuff like that. But they did a marvelous job with it, and showing what it's like to be in one of those things with the flat, shells going off around them, with that thin aluminum skin, just, stuff flying through and ripping things to pieces. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, over the years, I've gone to a number of air shows and talked to some of the guys who are in the crews of that. And, I don't know how they did it. Like the little guys in the ball turrets hanging down, and there's nothing between you. It's, like I said, some little aluminum and plexiglass, and they're coming at you throwing 50 caliber shells in your direction at hundreds per minute. And then just the little things too, like these planes, the B-17s were not pressurized. So when you got up there, you had to be wearing electric suits with electric gloves and electric pant warmers and everything else, and oxygen masks, and shooting out through open window. They had tried putting windows in, to block it, and it turned out that it really restricted the guns. So you're up there, you're going 120 miles an hour, and the wind is coming in at you. I mean, just flying in one of those things, let alone the guy shooting at you, is a tremendous thing. There was a guy that I mean, when I fly in the B-17, I tell you, I had earplugs, and there were people who wanted to pay me money for them. I mean, when all four of those engines are going, it's so incredibly loud. Well, there was a guy named Jim Modes years ago. He was another T-6 pilot, and Jim had been he was a really good pilot, one of the best pilots I ever met. And they would not let him fly combat. They only would let him train other pilots. And they told him, they said, look, if we send you overseas and you get shot down, you're gone. But if you're over here and you can train 20 guys and they get shot, only half of them get shot down, we're still ahead of the game. So, and he was career military, and they didn't want to let him go. And he finally said, look, I got to get some combat time in if I'm going to be an army officer after the war. I want to stay in. So they finally let him go over to Germany at the last 2 weeks or something of the war. He shot one plane, doesn't know if he hit it, but at least now he could say he served in the European theater of operations. Well, the trouble was by flying these planes for so many years, Jim was really, really deaf. I mean, his earshot was just terrible. His ears were shot. But he did a tremendous air show act, and he was incredible. One of the things he delighted in the audience is he would take the T6 and he would fly it inverted about 6 feet down the entire runway, and then off he'd go. Well, the tower no longer wanted to let him fly because he couldn't understand what they were telling him. You know, he couldn't hear them anymore. So everybody had to go with a safety pilot. Well, one year I got to be Jim Mode's safety pilot, which was the stupidest thing I think I've ever done on the planet Earth. Because if we're flying upside down and Jim had had a heart attack, I don't know what I would have done, right? But my whole thing was I'd listen to the tower and it'd say like, okay, you know, whatever his call sign, you know, mine was 60 Romeo Bravo, but 60 Romeo Bravo clear for takeoff. I'd give it 3 shakes of the stick in the back seat, and then Jim would know, okay, it's time to go. And then he would do the thing, and you know, they would say, okay, time to go left. I'd tap the stick to the left and everything. But like I say, he was a great pilot. But I still remember flying, looking up at the runway 6 feet above my head, thinking, I have no idea how I would turn this plane the right side up.
Up is down and down is up.
You know, I've done my share of acrobatics, and it really takes getting used to it. When you're in the plane and you fly, you know, 100 hours, and you want to go down, you put the stick down, right? Now you're inverted, and your brain, you have to really work on it to say, I'm upside down and I want to go down. I need to pull the stick the other way. It really, to me, maybe these guys can do it just great. For me, I'm always trying to remember, okay, what do I do? You know, it definitely was a challenge. And Carol can tell you, I went off and did aerobatics one night. It's like when you're driving a car, you don't get car sick. When you're the passenger, you get car sick. Well, I went out one night with my partner, and I came back, and he had been flying, and I was just turning green. I got back to the field, and it was like, oh man, I got to put my parachute away. I'm so tired and everything. And I was meeting Carol at a restaurant, and I got there, I wasn't feeling well at all. And I was just sitting with my head on the table, and the waiter came by and said something to her, is he okay? And she said, oh, he's been out having his version of fun today. I just wanted somebody to shoot me right then and there.
Well, you
So,
know, what you were saying about the planes being so cold, those B-17s, they address that in that show. And they talk about how, you know, the frostbite that could occur, and from things you wouldn't necessarily always think about, and they actually portrayed it. I believe what happened was one of the early missions, you know, with new, you know, green crews, right? They haven't been up in battle yet, and they're facing all this flak and these fighter planes coming at them and everything else. And the guy wets himself, and he's one of the I think he's the lower turret gunner. And by the time they get back, it is all frozen and stuck to his skin, and he suffered some very serious damage. And they addressed the fact that that happened to a lot of people for various reasons, that liquid would get inside their suits for one reason or another, and it would freeze up on them. And
Wow.
and it wasn't just unpleasant, it was damaging.
yeah, there was one
know,
guy was talking to his suit short-circuited on him and caught on fire. And he said, you know, the good news is the fire is out. The bad news is I'm getting cold. You know, so you know, that was a constant thing, that you had to inspect your suits before you went up for any sign of fraying or wear and tear or anything. But he says he remembered being really happy. I'm getting really hot. Oh, that's better. Uh-oh, now I'm going the other way.
Carrie's dad was a belly gunner in a B-17 during World War II and flew the maximum number of missions.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they got to the point where the first thing, you know, the big plane, they made the thing about the Memphis Belle for doing 25, which they're still debating whether another plane did it, but they just didn't have the film footage of it. But you know, after 25, you got to come home. By the end of World War II, they had decimated the Luftwaffe so much that people were like on mission 110. You know, so you see some of these pictures of the bombers, and they're just rows of bombs, and they go back, and there's another one, and there's another one, there's another one. So you know, but at that point in time, they were basically doing milk runs. And they were also doing, they'd get credit if they flew over Holland and dropped food packages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But Carol, when I started getting into the flying, we went to a meeting. It was called the Confederate Air Force at the time. It's been rebranded the Commemorative Air Force. And she was talking about how a lot of these guys were hung up on World War II. And I said, well, you got to think about it. You're 17 years old. They pluck you out of Kansas, your job at a drugstore. They send you over to England, which you've only heard about but never seen. Nobody you know has ever been to England. They stick you out there, and every day you're getting up and you're going out, and people are trying to kill you. And you come back, and then they give you the job back in the drugstore in Kansas. At what point in your life is anything ever going to have the intensity of those 2, 3, 4 years, whatever you spent doing it? So yeah, for a lot of people, that's what they talk about, because you talk about working at the drugstore, people don't care. But I just the one guy that I was in charge of our flying club was a P-38 pilot, and he got shot down over Italy. It was near the final days of the war, and he and 2 other P-38s were out, and they shot up some base. And on the way back, he had engine problems, and he told the other guys, "Go back. I'll meet you for dinner. Nobody's around. We'll see you back there." Well, unfortunately, there was somebody around. They shot Dick down. And the report, he had the telegram. He had a little museum in his law office. The War Department regrets to tell you your son Richard was seen being shot down, that sort of thing. And he parachuted out and he landed in Italy, and it was like something out of a movie. I mean, this old grumpy guy that I knew. He landed up with the partisans, and he was living in caves and blowing up German trains until the Allies came ashore at wherever they came. It starts with an A. Anyway, they came in.
Enzo.
Yeah, Anzio, thank you. He met up with him, and he get back to his base, and everything that he owned was gone, because that was the whole thing. Well, Dick's gone. Here's his boots. You take his jacket. I'll take his hat or whatever. And he goes back with nothing. But he said he came back with like 9 months' pay, because they had to pay him arrears. But he also had the telegram. We are happy to inform you your son Richard has been recovered. But you meet this guy, and like I said, he's kind of old, bent over, grumpy old guy, and you realize he was out there, a P-38 pilot, blowing up trains with the partisans. You can't picture these people just being, going through what they did when they were, I mean, Dick was the sort of guy, I could never imagine Dick being 19 years old. I mean, to me, Dick was always 70 and grumpy. But, they did this stuff. It was amazing people doing amazing stuff. When they use the term, the greatest generation, I really, I would agree with it. They did amazing stuff. So, well, I think in 2 weeks I have a whole bunch of World's Fair films, and I have some really neat one I was just looking at from Expo 58 in Brussels. I've got some other neat ones from. I've got a whole bunch of them from the 64 World's Fair. So in 2 weeks, we're either going to be looking at some more Disney stuff or some World's Fair stuff, depending on which I get through. But 2 weeks, a week from now, we'll be eating hamburgers and drinking. Well, I may have a beer at the next one. Just it's kind of fun. I was mentioning to somebody, we go to these lunches, and sometimes you only need people from work, and the only thing you ever talked about was work, and how do you do this? And you go home at the end of the day, they go home at the end of the day. The last lunch I was at, I was sitting with Brock, but I was also with 2 guys that were into classic cars, and they were talking about restoring a car and driving across Europe in it, and another one taking it to all these shows. And to me, it was just fascinating. Do you remember what kind of car the guy was talking about that he had, Brock?
No, I don't know, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was like, one of these things that was in the 1970s, you could buy the thing for $1, because nobody wanted them and everything. And now, he's been offered $70,000 to $80,000 because he's rebuilt it. But he drove it all across Finland and all these other places. And it was just kind of fascinating. So you talk to people about different things, and the next lunch the next time you're talking to somebody, and his whole thing is about antique cameras or something, and he's a photographer for Disney, but he's also in that. So I always enjoy it. You meet different people, and it's it's always kind of nice to see that people have a life outside of work.
Yeah.
You know?
Bill,
Yeah.
question. How do you feel about that Disneyland's gonna finally expand? That they're gonna finally enlarge?
Well, it's interesting. The expansion's great if you do it right. And then I'll have to hope here that Iger or somebody doesn't watch this and ban me from ever working for Disney again. If you do it and you do it right, that's one thing. But we have a Facebook group on for retired Imagineering people, and I just posted an absolutely scathing review that somebody did about the new remake of the Splash Mountain. That's now Tatiana's log ride. I haven't seen it. It could be the greatest thing on the planet Earth, but they basically put out a video of it, and people are watching the video going, "What the hell were you thinking of?" And that's the issue to me, is that the Star Wars land, for example. I like Star Wars. I mean, I'm an absolute nut on the Star Wars, particularly the first three movies. I really enjoy the rides. I thought Smuggler's Run and everything was really great. But Star Wars land by itself, to me, I don't know what anybody else has been on it. It's not immersive. I mean, it's all wrapping around you, but you don't see like the cute little characters running around or that sort of thing. I don't know what some of the things they have planned for the expansion, but the more they get into the Marvel movies and doing stuff on that, I just think it moves away from the Disneyland feeling to me. I just know when we go there and you see the little kids, they're still in awe of meeting Mickey Mouse or Winnie the Pooh or going on Small World or anything like that. Yeah, if they turn it into the giant Marvel slugfest thing, it's not going to be it's not going to be Disney to me. It's going to be Marvel World.
It's gotten away from the core.
Yeah, that's to me. I mean,
When there was no more Disney involvement by the family, it started to drift. Now it's miles away.
well, even the Disney family's been not involved with it for quite a while, and some of the things they did was like Star Tours. I thought that was a brilliant thing that Disney did. Because Tomorrowland has always been a challenge. How do you keep it fun and exciting? I was really sad to see the Mighty Microscope ride go away because it was just so cool. For being archaic in a way. But Star Tours is pretty cool, but it didn't take over the rest of Tomorrowland. Now where you have to have, even when they did, I don't understand why they did it, why they had to retake the Tower of Terror and return it to the Guardians Tower, because I thought Tower of Terror on its own stood by itself. And the rebrand to me just, it's the same ride, it's, different pigs, different lipstick, sort of thing. So to me, Disney really blew it with the California Adventure when Eisner just decided to buy generic off-the-shelf rides and try to change it, which is interesting because when Disneyland was built, a lot of those rides were generic off-the-shelf rides, but they were like the Astrojets were just a Carnival ride bought, but it was just done in a different way. It's to me it's some of the thrill and the excitement's kind of gone out of some of it.
Bill, where are they expanding to?
What's that?
What's the section that they're expanding to? I mean, there's a lot of stuff around the park. What are they buying up
Yeah, they
property
bought a
and
lot.
tearing
They've
down
been
things?
buying property for years. A lot of the hotels and smaller hotels and everything
Yeah.
around it, heading towards the convention center and that. So
Oh,
what
yeah.
they're going to do now is close one of the streets and go across and I don't know what they're going to do with the traffic. Put a tunnel under it. I don't know, but
Well, there's a main
basically detour
thoroughfare there.
around it. But yeah, they've been basically buying land. I mean, even back when I was there, what was the name of the hotel? It was the Heidi Chalet, Heidi Motel. It was I think it was the name of it, the Heidi, and it was it was done like Swiss chalets, but nobody. It was owned by Disney, but the employees didn't wear Disney type name tags or anything. And a lot of times people would come from out of town, and Disney would just park them there because it was they owned it. It was cheap. So if you had somebody from Florida coming in for training, they would stick them at the Heidi Hotel. Well, now a lot of those hotels that Disney would just buy up, and they would do it sometimes through third parties because they didn't want everybody thinking Disney's buying it and I can charge them for it. So just like they bought a lot of the land in Florida through shell companies, they bought a lot of the land around Anaheim and shell companies. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do with it, you know. And the whole thing too is, I hate to say it, I'll believe it when I see it. Brock, you may remember when Eisner came out and he talked about the Disney decade.
Yeah, Eisner's.
Yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do. I can say I'm going to take a walk from here to Baltimore. You know, I can get to the end of the block and change my mind. The Disney decade, he was announcing stuff left and right, and pretty soon the Disney decade was forgotten.
Well,
So I'm
here
sure
Disney kind of killed
something.
it.
But it's I think their plans are also over like a 10-year span. So I don't think we're going to see any major stuff 2 years from now that we're going to be you know, going to. So, well, I hope folks have a great weekend. I hope this wasn't too boring watching all the things get blown up. But like I said, I just wanted to remember the folks that went before us, so I didn't have to go. So that it means a lot to me. So appreciate folks joining, and we'll see you.
Thanks, Bill.
Oh, real
Thank
quick,
you
by the
thank you
way,
very
if
much,
you-
Bill. See you in
last
2 weeks.
week's show,
Thank you.
if you watched it and you watched it on YouTube, I said at the beginning, it's going to be interesting to see what YouTube does about, you know, the copyrights, right? So the entire thing, all the cartoons and everything showed last week. Does anybody have any idea what the YouTube choked on? They didn't like Bambi, and they didn't like Winnie the Pooh. So, you know, the Mickey Mouse Mad Doctor stuff, everything was fine, but you know, it's oh, your copyright's blocked because you showed footage from Bambi and Winnie the Pooh. Black and white, silent things, and you know, we're going to block it. Oh, you want to show the Proud Horses Vienna in sound and color? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, you want to go off and show what you call a clip for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? Yeah, go ahead. Why they pick what they pick, you know? But like I said, upload it. I sat there with crossed fingers. You have 2 copyright claims. Oh, okay. So if you watch it on YouTube, you can't see those 2. So,
Hey, Bill,
yeah.
from YouTube, have you gotten any of those medallions from YouTube they talk about, the awards? There's so many
No,
views.
I think those are people that basically let their stuff be monetized. And you know, if you go off and you get an X number of views and everything, I don't have monetization turned on for any of my videos. You know, first, I find it annoying. Secondly, I'm often using stuff that other people have, you know, created, and I would feel guilty of taking anything for somebody else's effort. But
There's
some
There's a
people,
way to get around it, though.
what's that?
There's a way to get around the commercials during
Oh,
YouTube
yeah.
videos.
Oh, no, I have an ad blocker that does a great job on that. Yeah.
No. If where you see www.youtube, if you put a dash between the T and the U, it knocks out a lot of the commercials.
Oh, okay.
Not all the clips does it work on, but I've tried it with about 20, and like 18, it worked.
Oh,
It's
now
weird.
I
secret's out
subscribe
there.
to
You're gonna
YouTube
know.
Premium. If you get YouTube Premium for a fee, no more commercials ever. Then it's a pleasure watching it.
Yeah, well,
If you want to spend a couple bucks.
I'm paying enough for cable and everything else.
Me too. Me too.
I cannot think of how many streaming services I pay for now, and you know, they get you. Like, we loved watching Ted Lasso, all right?
Yeah.
You get this thing free, you know, Apple TV, you know, and we watch Ted Lasso, and I have a thing, I have to remember to cancel it. Oh, Masters of the Air, that sounds like it'd be really interesting. Oh, but you know, I'm so far behind. I haven't seen the last episode of Picard yet. So I mean, there's just so much stuff out there, you know. And the trouble too is when you're doing all the stuff on the computer, I try to watch some of it, you know, but when you're really trying to edit or something, oh God, what did they just? And you have to rewind it and go back. So, but like I said, recently I've been. Did anybody else ever watch the show Alias Smith and Jones?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was on a long time ago.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah,
That's in '80s.
yeah. I mean, it was the one.
Antenna TV runs it.
Yeah, Pete Dool was he played Hannibal Hayes, and he committed suicide, so they replaced him with Roger, whatever. He was the guy that did the narration for it. But some of the stories are really great. I like to watch it because they got a lot of really big celebrities to appear in it. And, so like in this one, the bad one is Ida Lupino, and this one, the gal in the saloon is Ann Southern, and over here, they just got a whole bunch of different people from different things to do it. It's sort of like how everybody would later redo the Love Boat, with all the stars of the past or whatever. But I
Right.
just enjoy watching. I also, having worked at Universal, and it was a Universal show, I just enjoy watching it to see how many times they go down the same street or pull the same train to the same station and hang a sign, Rockville, Scottsville, Waynesville, Bethtown. So,
Man
I-
from Uncle, how many times did they shoot on the same scene? And it
Oh,
was in
yeah.
every
love
country
that
in the
show.
world.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
They got their money's worth.
We don't,
the
every
TV
time we
series
see a show with
Combat,
a
how many
spiral
times they stayed in the
staircase.
same village, right? What were you saying, Tom?
Oh, every time we see a show with a spiral staircase, we go, Man from Uncle. Or if somebody does a karate chop, on a neck, and then they fall over dead or unconscious, it's like karate chop.
Yeah.
Because it's just so funny, that they barely tap a guy and they lays him out cold,
Oh, and everybody knew it, and everybody could do it perfectly. There was something that came on TV the other day. It was something about the Man from Uncle, and they're in it, and Ilya's flying the helicopter, and I said, being an uncle agent has to be really, really tough, because you got to be able to fly a jet, fly a helicopter, scuba dive, parasail, karate chop, shoot, speak 12 languages, and then dress impeccably. So, I
And get the girl.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Don't forget
You know-
that. You got to get the girl.
It has the complete set of Man from Uncle. Comes in a briefcase, like a chrome briefcase.
Yeah,
It's
we
Yeah.
have that.
really cool.
Guilty, got it. So.
You're kidding.
No, I mean, I tell you, I watch very little modern TV. I may have mentioned before, I can't even think what the current, I couldn't even tell you what a modern show is these days. There's just so much good stuff to watch, and like I said, it's available, and go off and watch it. And to me, it's just more escapism fun than the terrible stuff that goes on some of it today. So.
Here.
Never seen
Yeah.
an episode of the Kardashians. I never will. But
No, no.
No, I've never watched
God,
that.
no.
Never.
I sat on a plane
Please.
from here to New York one day, and the gal in front of me, you can see through the aisle between the seats. She watched Kardashians before takeoff, and as we landed, she was still watching. So like 5 hours of mindless crap, and my mindless crap at least was probably The Man from Uncle or something entertaining. But I'm watching it to go, I cannot believe that you do this to yourselves,
Yeah.
I sooner read a book.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, well, great. I hope everything goes well with your move, Don. So 2
Thanks.
weeks.
We'll see you in
now,
about 3
being,
weeks.
The new homestead. Did you ever give away your massive bookcase?
No, Behemoth is still sitting here behind me. A couple of people who expressed interest, but in 10 days it's going to be destroyed if nobody comes to get it. So,
The new owners don't want it.
well, nobody's bought the house yet. It's going to be fixed up once we leave.
Oh, I was gonna.
So yeah,
want to get
and our
sold.
realtor is telling us that people don't want bookcases anymore. So it actually,
Where's the house?
this is Round Rock, Texas.
Where is that?
called?
Where's that in relation to what
Austin.
major city?
We're just north of Austin.
Where I think it was 109 on Thursday.
Well, that was the heat index, but it's been in the high 90s. We haven't hit 100 yet, but they're thinking 180 today or tomorrow, and it's going to stay there for quite a while. So,
Probably glad you're leaving.
oh well, that's one of the main reasons we are. That it's getting silly how hot it is here. It's just awful.
Well, this week's supposed to be in the 70s. So we had 2 days where it got hot. And I was lucky I didn't have to get out of the car and deal with any collisions. And, the next week it's in the 70s. I'm going to be enjoying it.
Worth the extra property taxes.
Yeah. Well, ironic.
Uh,
In Vermont, property taxes are actually very high, but because we're retired seniors, we get a huge break. We'll actually pay less in taxes overall in Vermont than we do here.
Cool.
And we own, the land you see behind me, 12 acres of land, mostly forest. And here I sit on one little subdivision lot. So we're gonna own probably 30 times as much land and pay less than half the property taxes. It's kind of weird.
Well, you don't have to look at your neighbors anymore.
We can't see neighbors. Yeah.
That's the good
We're,
thing.
we're literally completely isolated up there on Mount Lancaster, as I call it.
Okay, let's make a note here on February 1st. Let's all ask Don how it's going.
Yeah, goodbye, guys. Take
Hey,
care.
I grew up there. I know what the winters are like, and it's a little warmer in the winter there because
Yeah.
change. But
Well,
We will.
enjoy. So hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks. If we don't, we'll know you're unpacking.
yeah, I won't be here in 2 weeks. I'll be here in 3. I will be driving the dog across country in 2 weeks.
Enjoy. Hope you have a safe journey.
Thanks.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
see you,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.